Hello everyone. Today me and Andrew will compare and comment on the various merits and demerits of quantitative measures of living standards. So first I will give the evolution of the standards, and then I will compare the pros and cons. Then Andrew will elaborate on the pros and cons, and we'll conclude. So the first one is the GDP per capita. It's the most used measure of standards of living. It's used done by Kutnets. It reflects only the economic activities that flow through the markets. That, for instance, if a family would, instead of going to a restaurant, will cook in its own a meal in its own house, so it will not be considered at this measure. The second one is the GDP per capita purchase power parity. It's developed by the UN in order to have other indicators of living standards. It improves international comparability with the purchase power parity. Third one is the life expectancy. It includes basic human needs approach to living standards, such as clothing, shelter, and water supply. And then the fourth one is the GNH, the gross national happiness. It's I think it's kind of interesting. It's developed by the king of Bhutan. It's balanced economic development with emotional and spiritual well-being. Lastly, the HDI, Human Development Index. It's weighed in addition to life expectancy, literacy, and income. So now we'll speak about the pros and cons of those standards and what they say eventually. So the nominal wages, real wages, the pros of it is that it's available. It's a strong proxy for welfare and unskilled labor. That was this measure was cities were building in buildings, and there were construction workers who were like less. The construction workers had the cities had the data of the wages of the construction workers. The cons of these measures: it imply welfare is determined by wages, and also another con is it's only a segment of the nation. It not include doctors, for instance, and nurses. So what it say eventually? It say that the UK and the Netherlands got wealthier in the 17 and 1800s. The second one is the GDP per capita purchase power parity. The pros is that it's comparable between nations. The purchase power parity make it more complete cost of living. It involves more ingredients. Bless you. The cons is that welfare not necessarily come from income. The other measurement for that. Another thing is the purchase power parity. How do you calculate the basket of the cost of living? There's a debate about it. So what it say? It say that there's huge divergence in the post 150 years. There's a catch-up of the Asian tigers in the last 40 years, and the sub-Saharan African lags far behind. Third one is the life expectancy. It implies that measures such as health, nutrition, living conditions, disease, labor environment are crucial for measures of life standards. The cons is that more public health than individual income. That means that if you live longer, it's not necessarily that you live better. What it say? It say that there's log trend with GDP per capita. Less variation among countries with the standards. The fourth one is the Human Development Index. It's the pros that it's easy to understand and it's broadly calculated. It includes basic income and welfare measures such as literacy and education. The cons is it's again fairly it's criticized why those variables are there specifically, why those and not others. And again, such as the life expectancy, it say that it's make a log trend, and Andrew will further explain this. Last one is happiness. The pros, it is the first time that you approach the people and ask them how they feel. Are they really happy? So it's bring a broader analysis of satisfaction. The cons is that it's subjective. There was an experiment being made about give a survey people whether they're happy or not. In order to make this survey, they had to go and make a photocopy of the sheet. So for some people, they were waiting 25 Ps waiting to use to the copy machine, and the others did not. So though they had this 25 Ps, were happier. So this experiment basically proved that it is subjective. And then another con is it's culture related. Some countries such as Brazilians are much more happier, so it's kind of... and methodology is not well unified. There's several indicators for it. So what I'd say basically, it say that social classes vary. Richer are happier. Poor people are less happy. And not individual variation. There is no individual variation in time. People remain in the same happiness throughout time in the life cycle. So this is it. Now I will give the stage for Andre, which we will further elaborate about merits and demerits of those items.
So we had this huge bunch of indexes and variations and explanations, and actually we were just trying to answer 12 questions with the problems of the indexes that we have in economic history over the past 150 years. But the question is, which is actually was the question of last year's exam, do they tell us a different story? Like basically in the last 3 months we have been listening that there was a huge divergence in the past 150 years. So to try to answer this question, what we did is that we downloaded the World Bank database, and we were trying to analyze the main indexes, one versus each other. So the first one is the GDP per capita PPP and the GDP per capita. I think this is the most basic one. As you guys can see, the dots are countries, and there is a huge correlation, meaning the richer are richer, the poor are poor. However, the poor, on a PPP perspective, they move horizontally, meaning they got richer, because the cost of living is lower than the nominal wages that they get. And the opposite side happens to the rich countries. But still, the R-squared, the correlation is very strong. So there is no big difference in message, meaning richer are richer, poor are still poor. Just as examples, India, for example, when you translate from GDP per capita to GDP per capita PPP, it grows 168%. It's the most extreme case. On the other side, Denmark loses 1/3 of its GDP per capita when it's adjusted on a PPP perspective. The second cross that we did is between GDP per capita PPP and life expectancy. And here we do have a different scenario. Different scenario shows that actually the trend is not straight, is a log trend, meaning countries do reach higher life expectancy at birth with low increase in PPP per capita. And besides that, there are several countries that did even better than what the trend line shows. So the correlation, first of all, is not that high, although it's positive and it's significant, 0.64. However, we do see a group of countries that they were able to get high degrees of life expectancy with little GDP per capita PPP. Some examples of countries: Maldives, Syria, Belize, Ecuador, Sri Lanka, Vietnam. No, it does not, like, seems like countries from different places with different histories to be told. The third comparison that we have done is the GDP per capita versus the literacy. And here, more or less, we have the same story as we did for life expectancy. Meaning the following: the correlation is positive, however, not very high. And we do see a group of countries that were able to reach high degrees of literacy, although not much GDP per capita PPP. When we move to the fourth analysis, which is the HDI versus the GDP per capita, we see the influence of the KPIs behind. So HDI, as Tamir mentioned, is made by literacy, is made by life expectancy, and made by GDP per capita PPP. So life expectancy and literacy, they bring the log trend. And actually GDP per capita reduces the problem of correlation. That's why the correlation here is higher. It's 0.86. It's a very strong correlation. And it's not a straight line, it's a log trend. When we were going to the fifth and the last analysis was the most complicated one, because this is what Tamir mentioned regarding the happiness. There is not a unified methodology. So we just took two very famous. One is the Happy Planet Index, and it's basically led by Latin American countries. And we took another one done by University of Leicester with Satisfaction with Life Index, the famous one that Denmark showed up in the top of the list. So not to be accused of being biased and trying to privilege the Latin American countries, I decided to take this one just to make the comparison with the GDP per capita PPP. And actually what we get is again a log trend line, however with a very low correlation. The correlation is 0.36, which is kind of complicated, arguable, to make a strong claim that happiness is associated with wealth. So trying to answer the question, do we have a big divergence in the past 150 years, and can all the indexes claim the same thing? Basically, we do have three options to answer this. There is a correlation between GDP per capita PPP, life expectancy, and higher literacy, and HDI. However, not necessarily on the satisfaction side. So the backbone says it does. A second alternative could be that actually, like, there is a group of countries that they were very successful in increasing the life expectancy and the literacy with a relatively low GDP per capita PPP increase. And the third alternative to answer is that no, like, wealth has nothing to do with satisfaction. And by the way, like, there are many countries that had very high satisfaction standards and not necessarily are very rich. Thank you very much.